then you can use the book for reference, as a reference later. We're gonna use the PowerPoint. It seems like this presentation has been very popular. I've given this presentation to people in the centers because it seems like it's condensed and it's easier to understand than what it's inside the book. So that's why I wanted to give you this presentation that I'm gonna give today. And I've had people that have not been my students, and they were very worried about passing their Bonin test. And after they took this class, this specific, the water class, they took the test and they passed it. And the feedback was that the water class was, like determinant for them to pass it. So what I'm trying to say is that keep that PowerPoint or the slides that you're gonna have. And when you're studying for your certification test, just go by this, okay? Try not to go crazy trying to study this and trying to study this other flashcards that people tell you, this other book. You have the tools in your hands. The core curriculum, that's all you need, basically. And then you're gonna have the online stuff that I'm gonna give you. It's me giving a class like normal, but it's divided in parts. The same parts or the same topics that are coming on your certification test. We're gonna talk about that on the last day, okay? But let's go ahead and focus on what we want to cover today. There is a sheet. This sheet is for you to follow along and to answer as we move through the presentation. And then after the presentation, you'll have the quiz. It's gonna be open book with your notes. So even if you want to answer the quiz as you go, you can do that too, okay? Go ahead and move on. So we're gonna be talking about the water room today. And so why water treatment? Why water treatment? And it's because at the dialysis center, we're using the water that comes from the city, right? The tap water, the regular water that we use in our houses. We cannot use that same water to run the machines and to perform dialysis, okay? So that's why we have to treat the water inside of the dialysis center, and there's a huge room with different equipment in there that is in charge of that, okay? And during this presentation, at the end of this presentation, my objective is that you guys at least understand the parts of that water room, okay? We're gonna divide this in three main areas, so that we're gonna break it down so that you understand what is it that we do inside that water room. So we do it for patient safety, and we also do it for to prevent equipment damage. Those machines are over, like one machine, a new machine, over $25,000, okay? So if we don't protect the machine, I mean, there wouldn't be any business, any dialysis business. Dialysis, there are many companies that offer it. It's basically a business, okay? I'm trying to think if there is a for-profit dialysis center, and none of them come to mind. So basically, it's for business. So if they have to buy equipment constantly because they're breaking down due to water, then there's no business. Or it would be so expensive that a lot of people wouldn't be able to be treated at the dialysis center. So basically, a good example of the amount of water that is being used at the dialysis center is that an average person drinks 10 to 14 liters a week, okay? In the dialysis center, we use 306 about. This is an average, okay? It also depends on how big the center is, but the average is 360 liters a week. And you know what? That water that comes in, we only use about 10% of the water. the rest goes back down the drain. So that is incredible when you think about it. And that's why there are many initiatives that are talking about reusing the dialysate as we dialyze the person, like filtering the dialysate as well, to see if the dialysis centers can lower the cost of, hey Danny, how are you? Can you sit over here? I kind of took your space here. To lower the cost of the water usage, so they're trying to plan on changing that. So that is still a technique that is they are still studying it. I don't know when it's gonna come out, but there are a couple of units that are already testing the filtering the dialysate and using the same dialysate. But if you think about it, we're not too far from it, because you remember when we went to home hemodialysis, the next stage machine uses water, but the water is like a limited amount. You remember that? The black cabinet in the bottom? Mm-hmm. We add water to a bag that has like really high concentration, and we add 60 liters, right? And in that type of dialysis, the patient uses a certain amount of liters per treatment. So let's say that the patient uses 20 liters of dialysate. 60 liters will be enough for 3 treatments, okay? And they don't have to turn on the water for those 3 days. Does that make sense? So we're not too far. We're not too far from it. I don't know how it's gonna work in the center. It'll be different, because the reason we're able to do it with a home hemo is because they go on the machine almost every day. And we can run the dialysate slower, very slow. For example, at the dialysis center, the DFR, or the dialysate flow, the speed is about 600 or 800. I'm sorry, I have something in my eye. It goes from 600 to 800. In home hemo, it's about 250 mLs per minute, okay? So the speed is really low, really low. Okay. There are agencies that are going to regulate all this, about everything that we do with the water treatment. And they not only regulate the water treatment inside the dialysis center, but also the water treatment, the way that the city treats the water and sends it to us. If you call your utility company, whoever offers you the water service, you can ask them, I want to see the AAMI, AAMI, AAMI reports for my water. And it tells you exactly what things they added to the water in wherever you live, okay, the water that you're receiving. And including the bacteria count that your water has. You've seen that?
Yeah, because they went to my home and they did the test and they explained me what I have there. So, okay.
Yeah, and that's public. You can go on their website. They might have it on their website, but if they don't, you can call them up and say, I'm interested in knowing the water analysis. Just say the water analysis of my water, of the water that I'm receiving. And it tells you how much calcium it has, how much fluoride it has, how much magnesium, the bacteria colony counts, because, there's nothing as like free. The water is not free of bacteria, okay? Mm-hmm. There's still some bacteria in there, but the percentage that's in there is safe for human use, okay? I'd rather have no bacteria there, because I'm like, oh my God, I figure that. But anyways, so you'll see that. So AAMI, they are the Association for the Advancement of Medical Instrumentation. KDOQI, this is an organization, and this is worldwide. KDOQI, they are the ones that give the recommendations for dialysis, how we should treat the dialysis patients, what we would do, what are the best ranges in dialysis patients, like lab results. that are going to increase their chances of survival for a longer time, those type of things, because they are an organization that just exists for that, to do studies. They have like year-long studies, and they just follow people in dialysis, and they try to see, which unit is doing what, to see whatever is working, then they can adopt it and recommend it to the rest of the units. So that's why almost every unit looks at the Kaidoki guidelines to kind of go by them. Okay? Then we have federal regulations, and mostly those are Medicare. Okay? And then the state regulation, Medicaid can come in. A surveyor from Medicaid can walk in the center and check on the patients too. And then local regulations, whatever it is in county-wise. Okay. So this part here, this part is one of the most important pieces in terms of testing the water, okay? These numbers, you should know them, but I am going to tell you an easy way, and easier probably, I don't know. Let me just tell you a suggestion, let's say, to learn them. Just learn the middle one, okay? And let's discuss it. These are water and dialysate cultures, and then endotoxin testing. So there are two different tests. The culture is testing live bacteria, okay? Anything that is live. The endotoxin is testing the dead bacteria or the empty shell. So for example, if they see a cell that is already dead because we killed it with chlorine, bleach or whatever, but it's present there, that tells me that there have been a lot of bacteria in there. Does that make sense? Okay? And still, the bacteria cell, even if it's dead, it could be harmful to us, to the human being. Okay? So we need to do these two testings, and based on these results, we need to take some actions, or we might not have to take any actions in the dialysis center. And when we say we, the action may not be taken specifically by you. It may be the biomed instead of you specifically, okay? But these things you need to know, they're coming in your certification test, and you need to know why we're doing it. So let's talk about the water and dialysate cultures first. And this is a test, a sample that is taken from the water and from the dialysate in a container, right? And then it's sent to the lab, and it's left there for a couple of days to see if something grows in it. So the acceptable level would be below 50 CFU, which means colony-forming bacteria, 50 CFU per ml. So that would be the acceptable level. The action level will be anything between 50 and 199. If you learn the middle one, you'll know, if you learn this one, you know that anything below 50 is good, is acceptable. Anything above 199 is unacceptable. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All you need to do is learn the middle one. And then unacceptable levels is 200 over 200, okay? Greater. So here, acceptable level, we don't do anything. We're gonna perform dialysis as usual. Action level, here we can finish today's operation, but before tomorrow, we gotta disinfect everything. So we gotta disinfect the pipes. We gotta empty the water that's in the container. We gotta disinfect machines, everything before tomorrow, okay? So again, action level will be, we are able to finish with today's operation, but we need to have some type of action before tomorrow. Unacceptable levels, we need to stop everything. We can't dialyze anyone. We can't, nothing, not even today's operation. We have to cancel. We might end up transferring patients out. Okay. And then we have the endotoxins testing. So in the endotoxin testing, acceptable will be anything below 1 EU or endotoxin units, 1 EU. Action level is between 1, less than 2. So greater than 1, less than 2. Okay? That's the one that you need to learn. So anything below 1 is good. Anything above 2 or above is bad.
So I have a question. You said action will be 50 to 190. So we have to stop it.
We have to what?
Stop it so we cannot use it.
We could, the action level, so this level, the acceptable level, which is the first for both, we don't have to do anything. We can perform dialysis as usual. The second one, action level, is telling you you need to make an action. So we can finish today's operation, but then at the end and before tomorrow, we need to do something. Okay? And then in the unacceptable level, for each, we can't do anything. We gotta stop. That's it. Okay? So just learn the middle one. Learn the middle one. Okay, questions? Some of you are already answering the quiz. That's fine. That's good. No, that's fine. I mean, if you find the question, go ahead.
We don't want to forget.
Go ahead. Okay, let's go.
Porque si está dentro de ese nivel,
Okay. So when you look at the water, when you look at your water, what is it? What is it?
like, because it's in the range, so I think it's the C because the dialysis clinics can continue with the operate.
Come on, number two?
Yeah.
Number 2.
I do number 1.
For
Is that
nine,
a
yeah, it's
can
not C.
So let me go
continue
back.
operation, however,
I believe
immediate
it's-
remedial
no?
plan
It's here.
activated.
It's not C.
It's the result is here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's
So which
A.
one
It's
is
A.
A.
A?
Yeah.
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 A.
Uh-huh.
Got it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
She don't have no paper.
¿Llegaste a ir el sábado a la clínica? Oh. ¿Cómo te fue?
Super.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, guys. So let's see this one. This cord is bothering me. Let me. Okay. 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 So when we talk about the additives to our water, this is what I'm talking about. Okay. So these are things that are added to our water to make it consumable so that we could use it. But it's not good for use at the dialysis center. So for the dialysis center, this would be water contaminants. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So aluminum, chloramines, copper, and zinc, that can cause anemia. Aluminum and fluoride can cause bone disease, okay? This is, again, patient symptoms, so we're focusing on the dialysis center. So now don't think that you're gonna get bone disease because you're using the water, okay? Okay, chloramines, copper, nitrates, that will cause hemolysis. And remember that hemolysis is red blood cells breakage. Red blood cells breakage. We don't want that. Calcium and sodium can cause hypertension. Bacteria, endotoxin, nitrates can cause hypotension, okay? So let's say there's a breakthrough, God forbid, but let's say there's a breakthrough. And all of a sudden you see all of the patients on this side, they all start presenting hypotension at the same time. Not even think about it, right? If that happens, if you have a bunch of patients presenting the same symptom at the same time, we think it's water, something with the water. You don't have to know what it is exactly, but it's the water, okay? Usually it's the water. In that case, you turn off those machines, turn off, all of them. You cannot give the blood back. This is an emergency. It's a real emergency, and hopefully it never happens. It's happened before. Okay. Low pH and sulfates, that can cause metabolic acidosis, okay? And that means if we have low pH, means that the patient is what? Acidic or alkaline? Acidic, okay? Yes, acidic. And in metabolic acidosis, the patient can go all the way to shock, and this could be so dangerous that it could even cause death, okay? Like a completely shutdown of the system organs. Okay. Calcium, magnesium can cause muscle weakness. Bacteria, calcium, copper, endotoxins, low pH, magnesium, nitrate, sulfate, zinc can cause muscle weakness too. And aluminum can cause nausea and vomiting. If all the patients from that side all of a sudden start vomiting, water. Just turn it off, turn off the machine. Even if you're not sure. Okay? Let's say that you're the only technician right there because the other ones went to take a break, right? And you're covering, and the nurse is over there in the counter, and all of a sudden you see all these patients vomiting. Just turn it off. Turn the machines off. Or, the pump, the blood pump. Okay? So this is an example, this is like a small sample of different things that could happen. This is why it's so important that when you go back and you are the one in charge of testing the water, everyone that went to the center went to see the water testing, you guys saw it?
Yes.
You guys saw it. Did you go to the center already? Did you see the water room?
Yep.
Okay, you go this week, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you see the water room? Lydia, you saw the water room. Water room, we're talking about, you saw the water room? You saw the water room. Okay. Guys, it's super important that when you go back there, doesn't matter what you see other people doing, okay? You guys are gonna see a lot of things, and I understand that. Don't focus on that. Focus on what you're there to do. And I do believe in my heart, and every time I say this, I just get chills all around me. But I do believe in my heart that you guys are gonna be part of this generation that's just gonna move into, when I vision it, or visualize it, I visualize, like you guys going in the center, and somehow, I don't want anyone
the
to,
right steps.
yes, and I don't want anyone to lose their job or anything, but what I really see is you guys occupying spaces and jobs, and where people do not belong there, they're going.
But
That's what I see, and I see, you guys are gonna be part of that. I see that, and not only from this program, I see it from all over, because new programs are gonna rise and all that, with this problem, because it's a problem, and I know it. So soon, I see in a couple of years, I would see a different culture inside of the dialysis centers. Culture of technicians that are doing, but also know. And cultures of also nurses that are doing, but also know. Okay. So we're gonna divide this in 3 now. Let's talk about that purification process. Before we go into the purification process, any questions? Because we were talking about what the water has, okay, the contaminants that the water has, and we talked about the culture testing and endotoxins testing. Now we're gonna move into what is it done to that water inside the dialysis center, the process. So we're gonna divide this in 3. It's gonna be the pre-treatment, and the pre-treatment is before the RO. The RO is the reverse osmosis system, okay? Again, if you wanna write that, RO is the reverse osmosis system. Did you all identify the RO?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. You notice it was a machine, a big machine. It's a purifier. It's a filter. It's a very, very expensive piece of machine. Okay? So just look at it as, okay. So just pre-treatment is everything that we're going to do to the water to make it softer. Okay? We're going to try to make the water softer. That would be the pre-treatment. Then, in the purification, this is the most important part, okay? This would be the most important part, the purification. Okay? Here we have the RO, which is reverse osmosis. And we're going to talk about this in a minute. And this piece of equipment, the RO, is very, very, very expensive. So this part, the pre-treatment, is going to be to make the water softer. And it also will protect the RO. Because really what does the job here is the RO. Okay? And then we have the distribution loop. If you guys understand this, guys, you're going to be ahead of the game. Distribution loop is just the delivery system, okay? How that pure water is going to be delivered. So the distribution loop is the pipes. Okay? So anyways, yeah. Okay, let's continue. So again, coming back to here. So the water is going to go through 3 different steps. The first step is going to be the pre-treatment before the RO, right? And we do that to make the water softer and to protect the RO. Then the purification, this is the most important step. This is where we put that water very, very, very pure, okay? And then the distribution loop, which is here, and this is the delivery. This is where all those pipes that go around the machines, like behind the machines, that's the distribution loop, okay? Now, if we would take water from the RO, purified water in the RO, in a gallon, for example, and we don't put that water in the refrigerator because we wanted to use it for our home or whatever, you shouldn't do that. But I remember that years ago, when I was starting in dialysis, we're talking about over 18 years ago, I remember that we had a hurricane coming and we lost power, we lost everything, electricity, but the dialysis center had a generator, a power generator. So we could function. So the director would let us take gallons of water home because we didn't have time to do lines to get water because we were working. So she would let us do that. But one thing they would always tell us, make sure that wherever your ice is, you put this water in cold temperature, because it's so pure and it doesn't have chlorine or chloramine or anything. It's going to be prone to bacteria. So bacteria is gonna grow in it. Okay? So like if you leave it outside 72 hours or more without being in the right temperature, you're gonna lose it. You shouldn't be using that water.
So
Okay.
could you boil the water first?
You could, but you don't. The water is so pure. You don't even have to boil it. The thing is with that water is that it has no protection.
Oh, okay.
You know, the water that we get at home has chlorine and chloramine in it, okay? And then the water that we have, like the bottled water, it has preservatives in it.
Okay.
It does, okay? To help avoid bacteria growth in it. But this water, the one that comes from here, has nothing. Like it's plain water.
Okay.
So bacteria is gonna grow in it, okay? Okay. So let's start with the pre-treatment system, and this would be like a blueprint of that, okay? I'm going to try to draw. I'm going to try to draw what you're seeing. Okay. So let's imagine that we have somewhere entering this water room, we have the faucets, right? The cold and hot water, the water that comes from the city. So I'm gonna write city water here, which is that, and we have the faucets here. Okay, so we have, it doesn't matter which side is it. Let's say cold and hot, okay? And then they go into this container, which would be like a blending valve. It just blends the water, the hot and cold water together. Now you see these valves? These are one-way valves. Meaning that the water that has passed through here cannot come back up, okay? We have something called the backflow in our houses that will not let water overflow our house. Something like that is the backflow. Okay, so, here, and we have it here too, the backflow preventer, okay? So all these pieces that you see, these are just valves that'll keep the water moving forward instead of coming back, okay? Just moving in one direction. Okay, so we have the water coming in from the city water. We have a water pump, because now in order for us to feed the entire system and to feed the entire dialysis unit, all the machines, we need to have a pump. So it's a working pump, okay? If the pump breaks, we cannot perform dialysis. We're not gonna have enough pressure, okay? Okay, so the first thing you guys see here is a multimedia filter. Multimedia filter. I'm gonna write it here. This multimedia filter, multimedia, and multi from many, right? And media, types. So many types. So what it does, this filter has different layers, and it's able to remove a little bit of bacteria, a little bit of chlorine and chloramines, a little bit of the hard ions like the calcium, like the magnesium, a little bit of everything. So this is where we start making this water softer, here, okay? After this multimedia filter, then we're gonna start moving into the water softener. Water softener. A lot of us have water softeners at home. This is the most common thing that we have in households, that it's outside of the house. Usually it's on the side. It looks like a tank that's on the side. That's a water softener, okay? And the water softener also comes with something that is called a brine tank, that we have to put salt pellets in it, okay? So let's just say this is the brine, and I'm gonna show you now what it is. Tank. So let's move on. So this is the water softener, okay? And you guys have questions on, if you're following me with the questions, there's a question there that you gotta answer. And then on the quiz, I'm not sure if we have a question about that, but if you have it, you can answer it, okay? So the water softener is for the protection of the RO, primarily, the reverse osmosis system, or this huge tank that's really expensive, and it's the purifier. So before it hits the purifier, let me try to clean it up a little bit, this water, okay? That's what I'm trying to do. It removes hardness ions. And hardness ions, an example of hardness ions is going to be calcium, magnesium. These are the ions or the elements that gets us ashy. When a lot of us get ashy when we come out. We took a shower, and when we look at ourselves, if we don't use lotion, it's like, oh, I'm so ashy.
Mm-hmm.
It's the calcium, it's the magnesium that they add to the water. Okay? Okay.
They put a lot in my house
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes you can even tell by the hair on your hair. You can tell. So it's sized for at least 1 day's operation, and it'll regenerate with pellet salt. So what this means is that the softener regenerates at night, okay? It does regenerate, like it cleans itself. And in order for that system to clean itself, it needs salt pellets. And that's why there is going to be another, like a tank. It looks like a trash can. It looks like a huge trash can that we have to put salt pellets in it. Okay?
And they have, when the clinic I go, they have one limit. But when they go down, they have a lot.
Exactly. And it tells you that there's something going on over there, go check. Yeah. What she said is that in the clinic that she went, she saw it that there's a limit in that brine tank. There's a limit when it goes down, an alarm goes off at the dialysis unit itself. And so to alert that something is going on in the water room. Okay?
yes.
And that was it.
Two actually, one for the big one, I don't know,
To the RO.
and the other is for the.
Yeah. That wasn't always there. Okay? That wasn't always there. That alarm, and it should have a light too. Does it have a light? The one that you saw, does it? Well, it wasn't on, but.
Yeah, the different colors it tells us.
Exactly. That wasn't always there. That happened after, unfortunately, problems that happened with this. People would forget to test the water in the middle of the day. People wouldn't catch up to this because if something is going on and there's no alarm, by the time somebody went back there, it was already under. Or sometimes they figured it out because something happened in the center. There was a huge, I'm not gonna say what company it was, but it was in Texas. There was a huge breakthrough from the water where the patients in the unit, they all started to present symptoms. they had to stop everything. 911 was called. Most of the patients were transferred to the hospital. A few of them died, and others ended up in ICU. Some of them survived. So that was a huge case of a couple of years ago. And finally, the family came together, of course, right? And there was a huge lawsuit. But the company, the dialysis company, settled with the family, meaning that they offered a couple of $1 million for. Yeah. So after problems like this, then the steps like, okay, we should put an alarm here with a light and all that, that came up. That came up after, later. Okay, so when the offline means when we're not using it, okay? So offline hardness testing at the end of each operating day, post softener. So what this means is, when do we test the softener? At the end of every operating day. Now, there are many clinics that are taking an extra step as precaution, and they're testing in the morning and at night. So if you choose morning and night, it's correct, okay? So online monitoring of the pressure drop with pressure gauges located pre and post softener tank. What this means is, how do we monitor this is working? Because there are pressure gauges that is going to tell us that the pressure dropped. Daily verification of the timer setting for the correct time of the day. The softener has a timer. When you go back there, if you're the person doing the testing of all these water, the water in all these systems, there's going to be a log that is going to ask you about the time on the softener. Okay, that time has to match the actual time. The reason for that is because the softener is going to be set to do the regeneration during nighttime while the patients are not there. So if the time on that softener is not accurate, and let's say, I don't know, we lost power and nobody fixed it, and it's showing you that it's 1 a.m., right? And the regeneration is supposed to be at 3 a.m. So 2 hours into dialysis, the thing is going to start regenerating itself while we're dialyzing patients. So what happens is that, remember that it's cleaning itself, so it's releasing things that had already filtered. So we are exposing patients if that happens. So that time has to be accurate, and if it's not, change it. So that's why everything that you are checking in that dialysis, that water's room, it's important. Okay, and then the salt must be maintained so that the softener can be regenerated. Okay, so that's how the brine tank looks. This is the brine tank. And these are salt pellets, see? And then this back here is a tank, that's the softener. The brine tank should be at least half full of salt. It should be checked daily and documented on daily water treatment log. Anybody has a water softener at home by any chance? Do you have a water softener?
In this house, no.
No? Do you change, do you add the water? Because it dissolves.
Yeah. Sometimes my husband put a hose in there and then throw the nasty water out.
Exactly.
And then put the salt in, and the next day,
It's already, yeah, because it depends on the usage of the water in your home.
The blocks one, not the loose salt. Because the loose one is finished faster, and you can feel it when we take a shower. My daughter said,
I see.
the salt's already gone. I said, how do you know? And then when I take the water, wash my hand, I'm like, okay. So now we stop and we wipe the block when we put it in.
Yeah.
It's better.
Okay. And then the timer, you guys should always be looking at the timer, making sure that is accurate. Because sometimes when we lose power, electricity, or like it flickers, yeah, you gotta make sure that the time is accurate, because if not, it's gonna regenerate while you guys are using it at home.
It's generated by itself too.
It does,
Uh-huh.
yeah, it does.
I mean, sometimes I'm like, so I'm like, what's that voice? And then that was the first time. When I went
Yeah.
outside and I said, water's going out. I'm like,
And you know what?
I didn't
Yeah.
know.
And you know what? Nowadays the water softeners are not that expensive. Like when I was renting a home like years ago, 2007, and I wanted to buy a water tank because people came by and they were offering the water tank thing or the water softener. And I bought it, and that time it was like $1,500, and I was doing payments on it. And then when I moved and I bought my home, I left it at that home. I wasn't gonna pull it out. So when I moved to my new home, or not when I moved, I would say probably like I've been in that home since 2008. But about a year and a half ago, I wanted a softener. So I went to Sears. And they had a special and all that, and they said, well, if you buy it with your card, you'll have this. Well, the thing is that I ended up buying one, and it was $800.
Oh, really?
Wow.
I wouldn't know that.
And it was a Bluetooth one, and it's like a new thing. It doesn't have a separate container for the salt. Is within it.
Yeah, I was in it too.
Yeah. Okay. So it tells us, or not me. It tells Renato. I said don't put that on my phone.
Me too.
So it gives an alert when the salt is low.
Low, yeah.
So it gives him an alert, and it also gives him an alert which I don't know if that's a good idea because he drives my daughters crazy. It tells when the water has been running for like a certain amount of time. So it's past like 20 minutes. So, and I have all girls. They're old, like they should be living on their own already, but they're still home. So if they've been in the shower for more than 20 minutes, sometimes it happens. Not sometimes, almost all the time it happens. He's getting an alert on his phone,
20
and
minutes.
I could hear it. Because I could hear the water running, and I could hear, and I'm like, oh no. And the water is telling him that that the water has been running. The phone is telling him that the water has been running for more than 20 minutes. So
when the salt is low too, in my house when we put water to boil water, you can see the foam.
already.
In the pot. And then I'm like, that's the first thing my husband said, oh yeah, you don't know. Because that's when the salt is low. I'm like, okay, when I went, it was all the way. Oh, you can't even see it.
Yeah. But let me tell you something. I did notice the difference. Because I went many years without it, and then now with it, I can tell the difference. I can tell the difference in I've always had problems with dry skin, and I can tell the difference. You can tell the difference. Okay. So the next thing, after the water softeners, okay, and let me write what the water softener is for. This is for hard ions, and this is an example like calcium, magnesium, okay? But it could be any other element. It doesn't have to be only these two, okay? But it's the hard ions. So this is what the water softener does. Okay. Next up. These are the carbon tanks. Okay, guys. I call these the twins. I call these the twins. Because we have two of them. We have two. The carbon tanks are the ones that are going to remove chlorine and chloramine. So that is one, it's a question. So these are gonna remove chlorine and chloramine. Okay, chlorine and chloramine. So let me step back for a minute so that we kind of recap what we're doing. So the water comes in from the city, right? It blends hot and cold. There's a pump that's gonna move this water through. We have a first filter, that's the multimedia filter. It removes a little bit of everything, right? Then we have the water softener, that's gonna remove the hard ions, calcium, magnesium. Think of anything that makes our skin ashy, okay? And it has a brine tank with salt that's gonna help. The only purpose of this, the brine tank that has salt, is to regenerate this.
Water softener.
To regenerate, yeah? So it has salt and it regenerates. Okay? So here, this takes a little bit of everything. The water softener is solely for hard ions, so now we're gonna focus just on hard ions. Then the carbon tanks is solely for chlorine and chloramine. Okay? And we have two. Let's talk about them. So this is how they look. And you guys, the ones that already went to the center, you guys may have seen this. And they always come in pair, and the dialysis center may have more than one pair depending on how big it is, okay? There are cities that have huge water rooms because their unit is, they're mowing the lawn, because their unit is huge, and it's a 24-hour unit, okay? So if it's a 24-hour unit, they're gonna have double of everything, because one set is going to rest or clean or regenerate while the other set is working. So this is how they look, and then they may have more depending on the clinic. So the carbon filter monitoring, how do we monitor them? We test them prior to the first patient, and then every 4 hours, okay? And the RO, in the morning, the RO must run for 15 minutes prior to test. So what are we testing? We are testing the water that's coming out of this first tank right here. Okay? We're testing it for chlorine and chloramines. And we can use, most of the clinics, they use like 30 ounces, the medicine cups.
Medicine cup.
Let me get them. Hold on.
Sí, ella ya enseguida pero siempre se toma ese.
You ready now? First check and every 4 hours operation. Mandatory for the chlorine. Prior to the first treatment, every 4 hours operation. She said you're right. She said you're right. She said you're right.
Cada 4 horas la enfermera, every 4 hours the nurse go in the back and check. The nurse or the water.
Check every 4 hours during operation. She did say prior to or every 4 hours. She said you have prior to every 4 hours. It's still right.
Magda.
It's every 4 hours, ¿verdad?
Prior to the first treatment.
There you go.
Yeah.
And every 4 hours. Yeah.
Prior to the first
First
treatment,
treatment
before you connect anyone,
Yeah.
you have to do it.
There you go. Anything.
Anything.
And then every 4 hours.
First patient, baby girl.
Okay? Okay.
That's what I get.
Okay, guys, so we would go here, and let me move this for a minute, let me just go, okay? So we would go here,
I don't read them.
Yes.
we would go here.
Sit on the screen.
This is important, guys, because you guys are gonna be performing this test, okay? So we would go post the primary tank, right here, this valve. You're going to, and you're gonna follow the instructions. Usually there's a paper somewhere around here that gives you the instructions of the strips that that unit is using. Know that there are different types of strips, and the different types of strips have different instructions. So you gotta pay attention to this, okay? So for this example here, I am going to draw, let's say that I draw 30 ounces, I dump it, draw again, the second, then I'm going to follow the instructions. And these instructions tell me, hold the strip, oh, and this one is different. This one tells me, hold the strip in a gentle stream with reagent area up for 5 seconds. So this one tells me to hold it under the stream. There's another one that tells me to grab, let me see if I have it, hold on, so that I can show you both of them.
Las 5 para.
Es que no lo ha hecho. Yo creo que es del segundo tanque.
No, el primero.
The first one.
Porque uno chequea el primero y si ese falla, sería el segundo.
There are a bunch of different ones. Let me show you this one too. This one tests for hardness in the water. This one is testing for chlorine and chloramine. So this one is the same thing as this one. And I have another one. But there are different ways to test depending on what you're using.
En la 4.
I know.
Que era ahí aparece.
And this is another one. So we have, look at these. They look the same, these two look the same, but it's like different versions, okay? All of them, if you read them, all three of them have 3 different directions to get this sample. So I'm gonna use this one because I got the sample there. This one says, fill the standard sample cup with solution, discard solution, and refill approximately 20 mLs. So we have it here. Then it tells us, immerse the indicator pad of the test strip in the solution and move test strip back and forth for 10 seconds to maximize the flow through the aperture. After we do that, it says, remove the strip from the solution. Do not shake. Wait a full 30 seconds. While waiting, fold the white plastic handle of the test strip under the aperture, as in figure 1, below, and then compare the reacted test strip to the color chart below. Okay, so then we're going to compare it to this. So what it's telling me is to pull the strip out. Okay, it's telling me to immerse it in here and go 10 seconds. And when you do this, guys, you really have to go by looking at a watch
Yeah.
or a clock. So 10 seconds, back and forth. Okay, so that's 10 seconds, now 30. Okay. It tells me not to shake. And while I'm waiting for the 30, I can fold it like this so that I have like a white background so that it's easy for me to test. So I'm waiting for 30 seconds. Okay, that's 30, and then immediately try to match. So moving from my right to my left, my right would be acceptable, because the acceptable range is 0.1, less than 0.1. Okay, so right now, am I showing it? Okay, there we go. I would say that it's 0, because it didn't change color, okay? Now let me try the other one. So that one was that one. I don't know if it's gonna change, let's see. Usually I add a little bit of bleach in it to make it a little bit more noticeable. And I went to get the bleach, but I don't know where it is, so. 10 seconds. And 30 seconds. It's not changing that much, though. That means that the tap water here is not too bad. Yeah, it's not changing at all. And I don't have any filter here. Okay? So it didn't change. It didn't give me chlorine or chloramides. Okay? So this is what you do. But you really have to do this, guys, with honesty. When you go inside the water room, is not a time to text back anyone. Is not a time to be on the phone with anyone, because as you go back there, nobody is looking at you. And you know that this really doesn't take you 15 minutes. People know that doesn't take you 15 minutes. So don't take the time that you're supposed to use to do a testing to be on the phone, okay? Okay. And also follow the instructions. This one actually comes with, you do the testing with this piece, okay? You just follow the instructions. And then this other one tells you to put the test strip under the stream. So I don't know which ones you guys are gonna have. You just have to follow the instructions and there's nothing like on your test that's gonna say, what's the proper way to do the testing of that's not coming on your certification test, okay? Because obviously they know that there are different ways. Okay,
So you take the first for the first time. Yeah.
What is it?
You take the test for the first time.
What do you mean first time?
For
Oh, from first tank. Yes. Yes. So let me go back a minute. We'll come back to that in a minute. So we already know when we're gonna be testing. Before anyone is connected, we gotta test, okay? Then every 4 hours. Then where do we get the sample? We will get it from the valve that is host primary tank. That's where we're gonna get it first, okay? What are the acceptable limits? 0.1.
Or less.
Or less. Remember that number. That number you gotta remember it, like you have to remember the culture ones. This number is important. 0.1 is not 1.0.
0.1 or less.
0.1 or less. Okay. So let's talk about the secondary tank. So we have a primary tank, we have a secondary tank. we normally do testing from here. If this one is good, is negative, is zero,
So
or
is that a tap water or just from the tank?
no, this one, so the tap water is here.
Oh.
First one.
This one is already, has traveled all the way and it's up to here.
Carbon.
So right now we're here at this point. So we do it from the first one, from the first valve, post primary tank. If it's okay, we don't have to retest.
Okay, so once the
The
first one is okay.
The second one would be for retesting,
Testing.
Okay, second tank.
the second tank, okay?
Okay.
That one would be for retesting. So let's say that I do this one, and this result was above 0.1. So we say, wait a minute, let's see. Let me test again. And when we test after the second one. If that one is okay, then we are good to perform dialysis. But now we're only working with one tank because this tank is backup of this one. If this test here is out of range, it means that we lost this tank. And we're only working with one. So now that we know that we're only working with one, we have to test post-secondary tank. And we gotta test every 30 minutes. And of course, we gotta report to the biomed, we gotta report to the director.
They have a number.
Huh?
Some have the numbers where we can.
Okay, so this is important. This is not something that when you identify, you say, well, I'll tell them later. No. This is something that if you identify, you gotta go out immediately and tell the biomed if the biomed is there, tell the nurse in charge, whoever. But this, we need to fix this because somebody has to go in there and test every 30 minutes until this is fixed. Every 30 minutes.
The first one is every 4 hours.
4 hours.
And this one 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
Second one every 30 minutes.
Yeah, if we're using, and the reason for this is, if we're using the second one, this is telling us that we are using just one tank. Does that make sense? And we have to try to fix this as soon as possible. That's why we need to report. Because when this one goes out, if it goes out because it got exhausted, we don't have any other tank, so we won't be able to perform dialysis. We will have to stop operations, okay? So again, what do you do if the chlorine levels are too high after the primary carbon tank? What do you do? Try not to look at your paper, based on what we discussed. What do we do if the chlorine levels are too high after the primary carbon tank? The first test.
Check the second.
Take the second one.
Yeah.
Repeat, check after the second tank. If the post-tank levels are within limits, how often do we monitor?
30
30
minutes.
minutes.
Every 30 minutes. Okay, and we have to document this. Now, if the post-tank, second tank levels become too high, what do?
Stop.
We gotta stop. We gotta stop dialysis immediately. We gotta notify the FA or the director and the biomed. Okay? Okay. So this would be here. This is the first or primary and secondary. At the end, you guys can take a picture of this if you want, okay? Every test, every 30 minutes from here. Okay, so let's move on, and I'll give you a break in a minute. Oh, let me give you the break now because we just finished the pre-treatment section.
Who did the
Who did what?
test?
Hold on, let me pause this for a minute before I forget. So now we're discussing, we're up to the point, I'm gonna repeat it real fast because I didn't start the recording. So at this point, we're talking about the RO system, which is the reverse osmosis system. And what we're trying to do here is use the purified water inside the dialysis unit. the reverse osmosis, what's going to do is going to remove the organic and inorganic contaminants, bacteria, and endotoxins. In order for us to have the reverse osmosis, we have to have a pressure gauge that is going to force the water, this water, to stay down here, because in regular osmosis, the fluid naturally wants to move to the area that has a higher concentration of solutes, okay? So that's basically in a nutshell. So this is how the reverse osmosis could look. There are different pieces of equipment. You may or maybe you didn't see something similar to that, but they look very similar to this, okay? They're big, others are smaller. So how do we monitor the reverse osmosis? And as I said, the reverse osmosis is, I think, the most important piece of equipment that we have back there in the water room, because it's the one that is going to purify the water that we use in the dialysis center. So to begin with, we see that there is a greater than 90% of rejection. So you saw all that waste water that goes through the drain? More than 90% of the water that comes in, more than 90% of the water that comes in through here, it goes down the drain. So we're only using 10% or less. Okay? Okay. So we have different testing. We have the conductivity, that is facility-specific limits. We have different limits in the facility. We have an audible and visual alarm on the treatment floor that most of you saw that alarm on the treatment floor. If something goes wrong with this, if it breaks the RO, we need to have an alarm that goes off in the clinic, in the unit itself, in the treatment floor, so that everyone is aware something is going on with the RO. Okay? So we also analyze the RO for AMI, and what we do here is that we analyze the tap water for AMI, and then we take a sample, and when I say we, as in we, normally this is done by the biomed, okay? But we take a sample, or the biomed takes a sample from the city water, and then they take a sample from post-RO, and they do AMI testing. So what they're looking for is, the city water, we were talking about this earlier, is going to have a lot of contaminants. Aluminum, it has calcium, fluoride, all that, right? And then when it passes through the RO, when it's tested again, almost all of that has to be 0 or 0.000000, almost nothing, okay? That's what we're looking for, to let us know that the RO is working. We test for AMI, or the contaminants, every 6 months. And we do bacterial and endotoxins, so the cultures. We do it monthly, okay? Remember the first slide that we discussed, the cultures and the endotoxins, and you guys are gonna learn the action level. We do that, those testings are done every month. And it's done from the RO. So let's step back for a minute and let's see what we've have so far. So we have the city water. The water comes in, right? It blends. It has different valves that are one-way valve. It will avoid the water to go back out. It has a pump that's going to push the water. The first thing that we get is a multimedia filter that is going to remove hard ions. It's going to remove chlorine and chloramides, and it's going to remove bacteria here, but very small amounts, okay? Then it goes through the water softener, and the water softener is going to remove hard ions like calcium and magnesium. Then from there, it moves into the carbon tanks. In the carbon tanks, they are in charge of removing chlorine and chloramine, okay? So what this one removed, now we're going specific, okay? And the RO finally is the one in charge of removing anything that is organic or inorganic, bacteria and endotoxin, okay? Any little animal creatures that are in there, in that water. The RO is going to remove it, okay? Okay. So now let's talk a little bit about the DI tanks. So, if our RO goes bad, we need a backup. Okay? This is an emergency. If it goes bad, we need a backup, and the backup is the DI tanks. Okay? And these tanks are going to do basically the same thing that the RO does, but they're smaller and they don't have the same capacity and function that the RO does. So we can only use them for 24 hours. Okay? So in this case, what it does is that produces water of the highest ionic quality. It removes 99% of the ionic contaminants. It's highly dangerous when exhausted. That's why we don't normally use it all the time, okay? Because of its capacity. Once it is exhausted, then it starts releasing everything that it had filtered, then it starts releasing it again, okay? So that is the dangerous part. So if we go more than 24 hours with the same DI tank, we're putting the patients in at risk of pushing all these things that we removed first into their system, okay? So typically increases bacterial and endotoxin levels, okay? So they are prone to bacteria and endotoxin levels and may be used for RO polish or backup only when the primary RO is non-operational, okay? And an example of this is when I used to work in Tampa, it was a weekend, it was a Saturday, and the RO broke, it didn't want to work. And we had to stop dialysis, give the blood back and everything to everyone, and we were waiting. So we called the biomed, and we said the RO is not working, and the biomed was 2 hours away. And he's like, oh. So, and this was the second shift. We still had one more shift to go. And so he said, is there any of the technicians that are there, or do they know, or have they seen how to set up the DI tanks before? So I go and I ask, and two of them said, yes, we have. And I said, okay. Well, I said to the biomed, I have two technicians here telling me that they have. If you give us instructions, we could do it, because I was the charge nurse that day. So he said, okay. So I call the technicians. We go to the back, to the water room. And these are smaller tanks. They're about this size. We had to set up 2 of them. But they are not connected to the system, to the hoses and to the pipes and all that. So we got to connect that. So he's giving us instructions and all of that. And let me show you how they look. I think I have okay, that's how they look. So we had to connect. See, they are separate. So we had to connect these hoses. You have to connect to them when you're going to use them. Okay, and they have bulb, and I don't know what we did. We were trying to connect the hose here, but there was a lot of pressure. So we were trying to hold it down, and we couldn't. And all of a sudden, the biomed said, just open this valve. And I opened the valve, and a lot of water starts coming out. Shh. And it got us all wet. We were totally wet. The floor was getting wet because it was like a lot of water. And we were trying to seal it. Oh my God, it was a mess, until we were able to connect it. So we were able to connect both of them, and we could turn it on. So we walk into the dialysis unit, and all of the patients looked at us, and they just started laughing because we were wet, completely wet. From top to bottom, our uniform, everything wet. We looked like the Ghostbusters. You know, there were 3 of us, and we walked out, we're ready to go. And we are all wet. And luckily, that unit, they had like extra, they used to give us the uniforms. So we were able to change, you know, except for the underwears, but we were able to change, right, the scrubs and then the lab coat, so it wasn't too bad. But we had to do that day because the RO wasn't working. So that is something that we would do. But then it was a Saturday, so the biomed was going to be there on a Sunday, and he was going to work with that. So if it's in the middle of the week, yeah, the biomed has to come that day, because during the night he'll have to work with this. okay? Because we cannot, if we use the DI tanks today, we cannot use them tomorrow. And usually we only have 2 in the center, so we gotta call the company that provides this. They'll take these tanks and then replace them, okay? So again, only when the RO is not working is that we use the DI tanks. Okay, for the DI tanks, it's going to be the same thing. We need to have the audible and visual alarm on the treatment floor. And there is one more thing for the DI tank. There has to be a valve that if that alarm goes off, there has to be a valve that we can go and we easily can move so that instead of the water going to the dialysis unit, it goes down the drain, okay, to divert the water. Okay, and we also test for Amy. So then, there can be an ultraviolet light. And the reason that I say that there can be is because it depends on how the unit is set up, but I'll tell you in a minute. So the ultraviolet light, the purpose of it is to slow the growth of bacteria and makes them incapable of reproducing. Used only in conjunction with indirect feed storage tank water treatment system. So you will see that at the dialysis center, you will have direct feed or you would have indirect feed. So what is indirect feed? Indirect feed means, so say that I have a tank, a water tank. Water, right? And this is getting full of water. If my water, the purified water, is going to stop in the tank first before it goes to the dialysis unit, that is indirect feed. Okay? Because I am storing the water in a tank and from there I'm feeding the dialysis unit. That is called indirect feed. If we're going to have something like this, then we will have a UV light. If we don't have a water tank, and there are units that are small enough that they don't need a water tank, and they just from the RO, it goes directly into the unit, then we won't have the ultraviolet light. There are a lot of centers that have gone away from using the ultraviolet light because they tested and they didn't seem to find a difference between using it or not using it, okay? Okay, so the last component before it goes into the distribution loop is an ultrafilter and an endotoxin filter. So this one still is the last one that's going to pick up any endotoxins that we could still have in the system, okay? So it's the last component before the water is distributed to the patient station, or the first point of use, such as a bicarb, mixer, reuse, whatever. It's a filter that can filter submicron particles, and it absorbs bacteria and endotoxins. So it's really, it's an ultrafilter, for really small contaminants, okay? Now let's talk about the distribution loop. Okay, so basically, sometimes the ultraviolet light could be before the water tank or it could be after the water tank. It depends on the unit, okay? So for example, I'm just gonna say, I'm just gonna draw it after. UV light. And then I'm going to place here an ultrafilter. And I'm gonna say that this is an ultra filter, okay? So all this part is purification. Now we're gonna move into the last portion, which is finally the distribution system, okay? So we already pre-treated the water, we purified it, now we're gonna push it through. So the distribution system is the one that conveys purified water to each point of use. When we say point of use, each station, each machine. It must maintain purified water quality and water flow. So it means that those pipes in the inside, you know how we have pipes at home and sometimes they get clogged or whatever. Let's say we call the plumber and he has to disconnect everything. And when he disconnects the pipe, you could see that it's very dirty inside, right? You can see like the green and black and all that gunk on the wall. Yeah. These pipes cannot be like that. Cannot be like that at all. So the components of the distribution system, in case you go to the center and they don't know what the distribution system is, the components of this distribution system is pipes, valves, regulators, and other piping fixtures. Anything, any thing that is going to help deliver the water. So all of the pipes. Did you notice all the pipes behind the machines?
Yeah.
Did you notice that? Okay, so all that is part of the distribution system. Again, maybe indirect feed with a holding tank, or it may be direct feed with no holding tank. This is an indirect feed, okay? So in this case, in this one, the UV light is before. You see it?
Mhm.
So this is the reverse osmosis right here. And then the water tank. This one has the UV light first. The ultrafilter over here. And then it has the pump. Oh, no, the ultrafilter over here, I'm sorry. And then it has a pump. It goes through the ultrafilter. And then these are the points. Or the stations. Each one of these represents a dialysis station. Okay? Now let's see an direct feed. Look at this direct feed. So here there's no UV light, there's no ultrafilter, it just goes directly. There's no tank. It just goes directly after the arrow, it goes directly to each point of use. Okay? So here, this part would be the purification system, and then if we keep on going, let's say that we enter the dialysis center here, right? And we have station, 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 station. We have a counter for the nurses. Let's say we have other stations here, okay? So this is going, usually it goes through one point and it goes around. Okay? And then usually there is somewhere that whatever is not used, it goes down the drain. And this here is the distribution loop. So that's it, the three parts. Pre-treatment, all this here, before RO. Purification is the RO stuff. And then the distribution loops, that is after RO and into the dialysis stations. Okay? So the RO disinfection methods. There is a RO disinfection schedule. Usually it's not done by you. The disinfection of the RO system is not done by you. It's done by the biomed, usually, because in some units, I've heard that they use one technician or two technicians to do this, or one technician that comes in with the biomed and they do it, okay? Because what they do is, it's something similar to pouring bleach through the entire system, letting this bleach dwell, and then rinsing everything out. It's okay, I got it, thank you. Does that make sense? Questions about it? It has to be done when there's no dialysis treatments, when there's no patient there. So the disinfection schedule, it's and these are like minimum. Minimum, it should be monthly for the distribution loop. But there are units that I know that clean the distribution loop in a weekly basis, okay? In a weekly basis. And then quarterly for the RO. So cleaning and disinfecting the RO every 3 months. There are units that do it monthly. But how do we know that there's no bacteria growth and all that? Is because we test monthly, okay? Then, why do you need to know when disinfection is done at the facility? Because we need to know if the equipment is going to be available for dialysis, to perform dialysis. Usually before cleaning, we got to test, okay? We need to know, before cleaning, we need to know if there has been any bacteria growth in there. Because there's no use to test after. We can test after, but it's more than likely it's going to come back negative. It's going to, because we just cleaned. We need to know if there is bacteria growing, okay? And usually if there is any bacteria growing, what we do, the schedule is going to be more often. The disinfection schedule, we do it often, okay? So the biomed takes the microbial sampling, must be completed within 72 hours before the disinfection, and 72 hours, because usually cultures, when we send cultures in, we have to give them 72 hours to have a final results to see if something grew. And then, of course, we cannot have any patients on the treatment floor. Okay?
Wait. The picture of it.
And then if anyone want to take a picture of this too, you can take. Okay? Okay, so let's review. Let me wait for the picture. Got it? Okay.
Yeah.
So let's review. Okay, guys? Let's see if you remember without looking at your paper. And I know that the last slide has this, so don't look at your paper. What does the water softener remove? The water softener, what does it remove?
Calcium, magnesium.
Any hard ions, the ones that make us ashy.
Hardness.
Just remember that, and we'll remember. When is hardness test performed? When do we test this one, the softener?
Before.
Before
Before you
the
start the
treatment every 4 hours?
Prior treatment.
For.
This is not the one for every 4 hours.
No.
Is it at the end?
monthly.
At the end.
At the end. And there are
On the
many
Sunday.
patients, many units that do it at the morning and end, beginning and end, beginning and end, okay? This one is for the hardness, this one is for the hardness, okay. What do the carbon tanks remove? The twins?
Chlorine.
Chlorine and chloramine. This one is the most important one that we're going to be checking during the day. And this one, you may be the one testing this one, okay? Okay. So how often do total chlorine checks are done?
Prior.
And every 4 hours. Don't forget that, okay? What are acceptable results for total chlorine?
0.1.
Good job. What does the RO remove?
The organic.
Organic.
And bacteria and enzymes. Very good. And we are done. Any questions? Okay, let me pause this and stop this. Thank you.